Hello and welcome back to The Dive.
For you.
World's
Podcast.
Semifinals. Really, I think we were talking earlier, it's like any other world. Some teams win, some teams lose. There's 4 left now.
Koreans always win at the end.
One of them will eventually win the World Championship. But really, we have NA versus EU in the semifinals. We have EU versus China in the other semifinals. It's been absolutely crazy. We're going to preview both semifinals matchups. We're going to talk about why we think Korea failed at this World Championship. We're going to talk about whether or not we think these types of results are repeatable in the future. But first, we have to welcome Deficio.
Do we? Hello.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I expected 3 European teams to be in top 4, so I'm
really?
a little bit
Yeah.
disappointed
As you said,
at this
if you
point.
just checked like 3 weeks ago.
Exactly,
what
as
you were
I
saying.
predicted a couple of weeks ago. So I think Vitality, if they had made it out of that group, could have done the same to Africa. You know, bam, we could have had Fnatic Vitality semifinal right now. That would have been a banger.
Well, I think that's a pretty good place to start. You broached the topic here, and since Vitality didn't get out and Cloud9 did, we now are in a world where we have NA versus EU semifinal, Cloud9 versus Fnatic. And you actually tweeted yesterday that you were still so shocked that your preparation, all our VOD watching in this week before semifinals includes 3 Western teams that we're preparing for, going back and watching games to actually build arguments on.
Yes, because normally when we VOD review after quarters, you're normally trying to focus on the winning team and what they did so you can explain what they're doing in the semifinal. And it's always the Western team getting smacked in the head. And you're like, but here, look how great the Korean, vision setup is.
Yeah, makes sense.
Beautiful map movements. And now you're like, wait a minute, I'm still watching C9. They're winning this game and this game and this game. And like, okay, I'm writing C9 stuff down. I'm trying to predict C9 in the semifinal. And the same thing, obviously, with double Europeans. Even if we had that in 2015, it's been many years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
at this point,
even watching the C9 versus Africa game, it was almost like the roles were reversed. You're thinking game 1, okay, total stomp. Game 2, looks like the inferior team might turn it around with the early lead. But no, actually, C9 just has better macro and better late game, so it's a 2-0. And then game 3, they're tilted. Okay, it's just going to be a 3-0, whatever. But it's normally the Korean team that does that to the NA team, not the other way around.
And it's important to kind of evaluate those stages, right? Because that's kind of how we're building up the stories for both of these teams that are in semifinals. I've seen both sides critique the other side's quarterfinal match, talking about, they made mistakes here, their solo laners were super far behind, and they still were able to win. Or they got this Baron steal by an Ornn auto attack with the hammer. That's ridiculous, which it is. However, in the last game of the series, with everything already trending that way, we do need to highlight the strengths and weaknesses of these teams that they showed in their quarterfinals, because both teams did have a lot of mistakes as well as a lot of very good plays. And that has been the way that this Worlds has trended towards, because teams have been rewarded for creating action. There's so much more action that there are more opportunities for these things to take place.
And I would say that watching a lot of these quarterfinals, there was actually tiny differences that could have completely changed the series. When you think of, RNG G2, Uzi kind of jumping over the wall and dying when they were around Baron, that turned around that series. That could have been a 3-0. There's the C9 one. If they don't steal with an Ornn auto attack, maybe that series goes a completely different way. IG almost 3-0'd their series over KT. That ended up going 5. Like, there's tiny differences. And we're in this crazy world now where we are preparing for this NA-EU semifinals. And I am thinking that immediately, like, this is the most hype NA versus EU game that we have ever had, the one with the highest stakes, and it feels so cool to be preparing for this. And Cloud9 certainly had a fairly dominant series, but obviously there were mistakes and there were ways that could have looked very, very different.
All right, so let's start out with comparing the players, and then we can do team play that we've seen from both these teams at the end, I think, to bring it all together. You want to start with top lane?
Top lane.
We got some young guns up there.
The NA Hope. So Whippo obviously started in the quarterfinal and played all the games for Fnatic. Source didn't get to play at all. I don't know if I assume they're starting the same way they started the quarters. If it is Licorice versus Whippo, I think lane-wise, there's going to be a lot of action. We might see 2 players trying to go for solo kills against each other. There's probably a chance it can happen either way. I don't think there's going to be a huge skill difference between the two up on that side. And we know that things like Swain can be picked, obviously, by Fnatic on their side, and even Victor Top was picked blind by him. So we might actually get even carry versus carry matchups, even though I know Licorice can play a bit of everything as well. So I think it's pretty exciting with two quote-unquote like rookies coming into the year who's done a lot better than anyone could have expected when the year started. Like, Whippo played in Russia like a year ago.
Yeah.
And now he's here. So, like, the change is so insane.
You know what's also funny about this matchup on Tracking the Pros, which tracks the pros in Korean solo queue? Bwipo and Licorice are the two highest ranked Western pros on the server, both in Challenger. Whippo 491 LP, Licorice 437 LP. As far as like individual skill goes, that matchup, I'm also really curious about the top lane meta development because we basically saw top lane Victor emerge between groups and quarterfinals, but then we also saw like the Kleptomancy Swain get pulled out by Whippo, and we've seen Licorice pull out, I feel like, more unique picks than others. He pulled out the Heckroom, he pulled out the Singed. So it feels even more dangerous with these two players to blind pick a tank, because if you do blind pick Scion or something, they're just going to pull out a Kleptomancy carry and get like 3k gold up on you. So in a world where mid lane counterpick has always been extremely valuable, I wonder how much that changes in this series now that I think the top lane counterpick is highly exploitable as well.
I think flex picks become that much more important also. Like, one of the series that really demonstrated this best, I think, was actually the G2 series, where we started seeing, so we saw Aatrox get slammed by Poppy, and then the next game they actually ended up picking Aatrox early. They pick Poppy. All right, now it's flex to the Aatrox is flex mid. Ryze goes top, slams the Poppy. In the last game, Aatrox picked blind again. They can't pick Poppy because they don't know if it's being flexed. Second round ban on Poppy, and then they just put it top, right? So it's like, after having seen that, there's so much that goes into actually getting these counter picks. It's not necessarily so cut and dry.
Yeah, that's where I think with C9, I have some questions regarding how many flex picks they will use.
Exactly, yeah.
Because they ban Irelia Akali currently, where the EU teams are like, oh, we want to first pick one of these and we can put them in both lanes. I just want to see if that's something they actually want to do. Because they in all the games against Afrika, they're just like, get rid of this, first pick Aatrox if we can, and then just draft more like quote-unquote standard picks.
Yeah, which is why I think the development between the quarterfinals and the semifinals is going to be so incredibly important, because both of these top laners are aggressive players. Both of these top laners can play carries and tanks, and if one of the teams can actually make that development, can get to the point where they're comfortable flexing Victor and Aatrox and all these different picks to the different lanes, I think it becomes incredibly hard for the other team to then get an advantage in the solo lanes, because if you don't know where the picks are going, you end up having to pick relatively safe and blind picks, and that can really take away, I think, some of the advantages.
And then we even open up the book and look at the overall strategy of top lane. Reaper, in his interview afterwards, talked about not even having to play the game of top lane to get the carry that's going to have the advantage, and actually sacrificing an area on the map intentionally and trying to use your strong side and push through that advantage while accepting a weak side, which I think is very important as we keep tracking how the way this game is played at this Worlds, because you are going to have a weak side all the time. You can't have strong sides on both sides of the map.
It's called a winning draft.
Exactly.
If you have everywhere.
If you can, even if you have a draft strong enough to win with a numbers disadvantage on one side, though, then
The other team trolled.
then that's actually insane. But yeah, so this is kind of the next level. As far as Cloud9 already kind of showing, hey, Licorice, we're going to pick you into the Aatrox Victor matchup again after you already lost it. And get blasted on that side, yet have Svenskeren still play around bottom side around Sneaky, where they have an advantage and they're winning, and try and create plays around that way, while something like a Victor is winning but is also scaling up and doesn't necessarily have as big 15 or 20 minute impact. And those are pretty interesting little nuances to the draft that we might have to take into account.
I think so. I think if we're actually going to think about the Victor versus Aatrox matchup. That's not something C9 is going to do again, in my opinion. I think Reaper said in the interview after, like, yes, it was intentional to put Keen on a late game carry and have like the mid game Aatrox. It was not intentional to have Liquor start 0-4-0. Like that
Especially
wasn't
game
part
two,
of the
he got
strategy.
slammed.
Yeah.
3 solo kills is never in the plan. That's
All according to plan.
That's never the plan going
Oh, yeah,
like
just the
step
matchup.
3, die
Build
so.
up the bounty and then shut him down.
You actually had a pretty good stat though, Jet, that you looked up for Bwipo.
Oh yeah, Bwipo and Caps both had, I believe, 5 ISO deaths apiece in their quarterfinal matchup. So Licorice had 3 like in that one game, but all of these solo laners on both teams, and really actually all the solo laners who have advanced this far have been playing very high risk, high reward, like a certain amount of disrespect, a certain number of ISO deaths, but also a pretty high number of solo kills. Like the types of matchups and skill checks that are being done are really volatile. So you're going to you see all these players willing to take the risk to go for the solo kill, but in doing so, if they miss a skill shot here or if they mistrack a jungler there, they just die, right? And that can swing massively as far as the game goes.
And the reason they're doing that is because the rewards are very big
Yeah.
for success in those plays right now. We saw in multiple matches for both of these teams, one of the solo laners getting early kills and hard carrying the game. G2 is another good example of that with Perks.
Yep.
But we should probably stay focused on this matchup.
There's so many things.
Because this semifinal is going to be
Jungle
Exactly.
matchup.
We're super excited. We've done the top lane matchup. I do want to zoom out and just touch on the teams just a little bit so we can talk a little bit about their quarterfinal. Did you want to talk about Fnatic or C9 first, Deficio? I'll give you the option as the guest of the desk.
So zoomed out.
A little bit zoomed out, like a bit of a recap of the quarterfinals.
Okay.
I do feel like those series are very interesting.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a bit about where the team was strong in these series, but also where the team was potentially vulnerable in these series. Because even though it was 3-0 and 3-1, there were some really close games in there.
So Fnatic, I think a lot of us, I actually saw this from fans, from casters, even from the Fnatic players, kind of talking about how this series, it didn't feel like Fnatic were playing at 100%. There was a lot of like issues for them, especially in the early game.
And they said that after the series.
They all
that
said
felt like
that.
they had an off day.
Yeah, all of them said they felt like it wasn't 100% clicking in the game itself, but luckily they're a good enough team to still actually win the series. I think looking at early game, I think EDG showed up big time in some of the games, especially game 1, but also some of the following games with targeting Caps specifically in the mid lane, which has been a very successful strategy so far. Mainly because Caps has not actually, like he agrees with the high risk, high reward, but he doesn't realize when it's high risk, no reward, which is basically when 3 players can actually go and kill you in a second and you're still pushing forward. You're not going to gain anything, you're just going to die. And he's not really adjusted to that. It really feels like here against a lot of the really good teams. So that has been a bit of a problem for them. I do, however, think the bot lane was super stable. Reckless obviously ended up being a big carry in late game, which was very big for Fnatic. And he's saying overall, like he had a very rough start to groups, but he's actually done really well ever since. And that's been an important part because he is one of the playmakers on the team. So I think overall, while Fnatic could see themselves fall behind in some of the games, they trust enough in their late game to actually bounce back in these games and punish EDG for kind of always only going towards mid and trying to attack them.
One of the biggest things for me across this World Championship actually has been how well Reckless has carried in mid and late game team fights in a lot of situations, because I know there's a lot of international fans who saw Reckless kind of be very mediocre at MSI, and then he didn't play pretty much at all during the regular season, and you come into all these matchups, especially when Fnatic is starting Bwipo, and you're expecting them to just, okay, they're going to focus topside, they're putting in Reckless so we can stabilize lane and be like, okay, later. But you think about their wins against IG, it was Reckless just jumping and outperforming Jackie Love.
Yep.
Reckless super outperformed iBoy in these games. And I do use the word outperformed because I think a lot of the other carries sometimes are losing their minds. But Reckless, when he does flash forward and when he does team fight, his damage percentage is like higher than it usually is. It's not like the old Reckless where you'd think he's just a pure KDA player. He's getting out a lot of damage in team fights. I don't know. I just wanted to say I think this is probably Reckless's best world championship he's ever had. just from a pure individual performance perspective, which I think is cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, when you talk about how a lot of the solo laners are playing this high risk, high reward style, he is very much playing a extremely different style. Like, I felt like watching a lot of their games, especially in the Xayah game, he's basically sitting at like 0-0-1 or 0-0-0 super late in the game, but he's up in farm, he has his items, and he knows that like he is going to be reliable in those team fights. And I do think that he was very much taking kind of like the safer approach, guaranteeing his farm, guaranteeing he's going to have his items and be strong coming into these late game team fights, while Caps and Whippo are playing more aggressive and kind of being more, I think, of the guys that are trying to start things and trying to create advantages and create space for Reckless. And when it came time to get to those team fights, he did perform really, really well. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that is actually going to contrast against the C9 bottom lane, who did play for lane advantage, who did try to play aggressive and be more of the difference makers, at least in the quarterfinals, because that hadn't been how Cloud9 had been playing really at all, in the group stage. But obviously, they did focus very heavily on bot.
Yeah, and when I think about the Fnatic team in general, they do have the well-performing bottom lane, but the team is a little bit of the double-edged sword, because when I think back to the quarterfinal, most of those wins were through team fights, often from deficits.
Yep.
So their team fighting is really, really good, but where I expected this team to almost be stronger, they were a little bit weaker sometimes. Like Whippo and Caps dying so much individually is a little bit concerning. However, then that concern is made up for by the fact that they can still play from a deficit. So it's a very interesting team to try and track, and more inconsistent than I think I expected.
Yeah, I think I also want to return to what Deficio was talking about with Hylissang, because one of the games that I really spent a lot of time on was game number 3, because I felt like it was such a breaking point for Fnatic, just taking momentum through the entire series. And that was the one where they actually part of the reason that they got behind in gold was a poorly set up team fight. There are 2 team fights that are pretty close together around mid lane. They have Yasuo and Braum, the Wind Wall and the Unbreakable. The first team fight, they force it where Hylissang is far from the rest of the team on the side, and Caps uses the Wind Wall super early, and they immediately get punished because it's easy to get around one of the walls and he outplays it. And that gets them in this deficit. But then, much like Vitality, much like Cloud9, even after that loss, they're down 5,000 gold. They are the ones to force the fight around Infernal Drake. They started up down 5,000 gold. They get it. They rush it before EDG can get there. Then they kite backwards. And they play the team fight so much better the second time around, not being afraid of the mistakes that they made in the first one. And Hylissang actually makes another clutch play. He actually turns around, hits the Braum Q on iBoy to set up another stack and refresh the duration. That's why everyone's freaking out. Deficio yells, "What?" in this team fight, because iBoy
Ult in with 3 stacks.
Ult in on Kaisa into 4 people with the Braum passives already stacked up on him, and instantly gets stunned and died because Hylissang on the outside has the presence of mind here while he's playing this team fight, zoning the Camille, turns around, hits this
Zone the Kai'Sa.
key ability on the damage dealer. And that fight, they get Infernal Drake, they get a Baron off it, they get like 4,000 gold off of it. It's like these little moments that you're talking about from these players mean so much in the context of the entire series.
Yeah, and I mean, that was obviously a really good play by Hylissang, but also when you see that you do get hit by that as iBoy, then you can't ult in.
Right? Probably didn't notice.
Because, I mean, maybe he didn't. And
talk about the carries, in this high risk mindset, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of those plays, right, where it's high risk, high reward, and that
definitely a bad play from iBoy.
That one was definitely not one that paid off.
Yeah. Talking quickly about C9 series as well, then we'll get back into the individual matchups of the C9 versus Fnatic game. 3-0 by C9, but I do want to just remind everyone that the games were actually pretty close in games 2 and 3. Like, thinking back to game 2, that game also turned on a Braum Q, in my opinion. If you remember, there was the super fed Victor. There was also a 5-kill Rise in that game.
Very fed Rise.
But there was a situation where C9 roamed 3 people up top, Lucian, Graves, and Braum, and then Afrika was going to defend the turret. The Rise was ahead of everyone. The Victor was going to come in behind. And basically, Kuro steps out a bit from the wave, gets hit by a Braum Q, and boom, C9 dives. if that Q doesn't hit, like if Kuro hides in the wave perfectly, then maybe C9 has to back off. Maybe they only get the turret. I don't think they're able to successfully dive, but they land the Q and they do it. So like that is one thing about C9 is how willing they are to go in on the slightest advantage. I think Fnatic is similar in that way, but also neither one of these teams is invulnerable because they are in these situations where that one split-second decision does end up deciding it.
Yeah, I mean this series was also just so different. Like I touched on a little bit earlier, but Sneaky in the group stage averaged negative 22.4 CSD at 15. In quarterfinals, he was plus 33 at 15. Right? They obviously that
playing
is
Kai'Sa.
of course, and playing against Uzi was part of that as well. He got super slammed the first game at Uzi. He was he was down like 40 or 50 CS.
That's one of the biggest stomps.
That one was
lane.
insane. But it was just interesting to see them be able to step up in this way and play this style, because I do think that it forces teams to at least consider that this could be a strategy that they take and have to respect it a little bit more in pick and ban, which I do think can help them in other ways, because Cloud9 is one of the teams that is very flexible with their picks, can do a lot of unique stuff in top lane and jungle and mid. But this was very much, not about Licorice smashing. Licorice was getting outperformed by Keen. He was he was getting blasted, right? In pretty much all three of these games. I think his Ornn game was maybe the best from him in the third game. But the Aatrox games, he was very far behind.
And
the Ornn game, he was still
game,
behind. They failed the
2v1
dive. Yeah, so it was just interesting. It was a lot about Sneaky stepping up, a lot about Svenskeren as well, who I think had an incredible series. Not only just the Graves game where he got ahead, but was able to actually snowball the game, and very often it can be difficult to have that team fight impact when it does go to those team fights as a Graves.
So that's actually what I like the most about C9 is I feel like they very early on in the tournament figured out, okay, what kind of picks do we need as a team to succeed? It doesn't matter if other people don't necessarily agree that you have to draft Lucian Braum in the bottom lane, but when they saw their matchup against Afrika, they obviously look at Keen top lane saying, okay, he's not the guy we have to beat because he is going to be just a star player, which is also why going for Ornn in the game 3 is fine because you didn't play more towards team fights. Yeah. I think they identified very quickly that the bot laner of Afrika has not been performing well. Tucson is not a strong laner at all. And they go, hey, Sneaky, couple of days of practice, now it's Lucian Braum. It's actually win lane for a laner who's not known for winning lane.
They had the worst laning stats of anyone in group stage.
And I just respect that a lot. Like, you go in for game 1 of a BO5 with that as your strategy, and when it works, you obviously just double down on it, you stick to it, you start playing around it a lot more. And that's just good adaptation, understanding your team. Like, people don't expect this from Sneaky, but Reboot knows he can do it on this specific champion, and he's against a weak bot lane. Let's go for it, and not just try and draft only strong solo laners and just boring farm bot laners. So I really like that adaptation for a best of 5.
Yeah, something that we talked about on the last episode of the dive was specifically with Reaper being very realistic over the years about the strengths and weaknesses of the various rosters that he has coached during the time, and being very willing to put a lot of faith and responsibility on players, even with small time frames of success or ideas on different champions or strategies to go with. And that has been very highly rewarded this tournament.
All right. I feel like that was good quarterfinal recap. We can jump back into the most hyped Western matchup ever, the jungle matchup, because we talked about how well Svenskeren performed in the quarters. And also, we said on the last episode of the dive, I believe, that the Lee Sin games that Broxa had against IG at the end of the group stage were potentially like best jungle performance by Western jungler ever. I did get a nice Twitter response, actually, talked about Shook's Lee Sin game when they perfect gamed Najin back in 2014.
Yes, he also went
I think absolutely he's right in there for that one individual performance. But what do you think about the way these two junglers match up, keeping in mind that C9 does have the ability to sub in Blabber if they so please at any point during the series?
I think group stages, Broxa was the best performing jungler during the tournament. I think Svenskeren was fine, but he wasn't like a standout. However, I think in quarters, one of the reasons for Fnatic's early game issues was actually that Broxa didn't really get to do a whole lot compared to what we got on the side of EDG, and especially the Broxa Caps duo never really got rolling until this fairly late into the mid game of the second game when Caps bound back on the Irelia. where I think Svenskeren in all the games managed to just punish mistakes. And I actually think, like, he's always been, I say always, so when he was in Europe, he was a carry jungler. Like, it was Lee Sin, it was like
Forget the TSM days, and this is pretty true.
you know, like this was just like, this guy will win you games alone when he's on form and if you trust in him. And then he went to North America, and on TSM he became the Sejuani guy, and you know, he was like passive and people were criticizing him.
There was that brief moment of time, I will say, in 2016 where he was able to play the invade.
At
For a
Worlds,
moment,
his
yes, he
Lee
got to
Sin,
play the
yeah.
style.
Yeah, he had that one Lee Sin game against Samsung in World's Group Stage that was actually super good.
But overall,
He
For
was
sure.
passive.
overall. Then he's on C9 here, and we get to see kind of the old Svenskeren. And I think Broxa will know how to play against Svenskeren's like style, even with things like Graves and whatever. And I think like skill wise, the matchup is going to be fairly even as well. But I can see in the early game, Svenskeren and Jensen, if they time ganks really well, like they did like with the LeBlanc and Zhao, I can see them get early kills on caps. And then it's going to be a lot harder for Broxa to answer if he can't match the 2v2 early game. And I think that's a way for C9 to get an early lead around mid.
Yeah, I think the mid jungles are really well matched in this game because I could say the exact same argument for Fnatic
Turn
side,
around.
getting those kills onto Jensen. There was a game, the Ari game. Jensen in the middle of the lane, Curl just flashes right on him with the Rune Prison.
Yep.
And we've got Zinzao on the side brush. You know, he's right in the middle of the lane, instantly dies. We can make
time it's a
we can-
Yasuo
we
in
can
there.
mirror the arguments, honestly. I mean, if you just wake up on the day and you copy the argument from one side,
But that's why this series is so interesting. Because
Exactly.
there are so many similarities.
and so much of it does come down to the performance on the day for a lot of this analysis because even looking back 1 week, the changes in the individual teams' performances have been very big. We've been talking a lot about, especially Cloud9, that have come the longest path, I guess. At each stage that they have performed at, they have shown marked improvements, and so that makes it difficult to. Are we going to project them to continue to improve up to this semifinal performance with Fnatic? Is it going to be even better? Are some of the other things going to go unpunished, or are there going to be answers this time around? But yeah, especially the mid jungle duos, I expect that to be extremely exciting for this whole series.
I do too, and I think the one thing where I kind of do favor Broxa is if you look at the year as a whole, certainly he has had a higher level of performance across the year. His
Yeah.
group's performance was better, but it's weird because normally it feels like at Worlds you can heavily rely on kind of the body of work across the year. He performed at MSI, he was incredible in summer, he was great in playoffs, he was good in groups. That stuff hasn't seemed like it really has mattered as much at Worlds. You know, Svenskeren obviously had an incredible quarterfinals, but I think that was kind of the highlight of his year. And, you know, at this World, it has very much felt like who performs on the given day, right? And these are two junglers who are very likely going to be playing aggressive styles, playing carry junglers, and whoever gets ahead, it can make the other guy look very, very bad. If you get ahead in carry versus carry matchup, if you get ahead in mid jungle duo, all of a sudden you're losing all your camps. You can't 2v2, you can't 1v1, and you can start to look really, really ordinary.
Yeah, I think, and this is both something that could be an advantage for Fnatic, but also a disadvantage. Broxa, while he will play aggressive and he does play aggressive picks, he tends to make less mistakes because he's not always going for the completely insane all-in. Like when he's rolling, he will do it, but in the series against EDG, like it wasn't him necessarily being terrible. He was just being a little bit more reactive in the early game. To me, it feels like Svenskeren is gonna aim for the all-in style. I think there's a higher chance of mistakes from Svenskeren compared to Broxa, but that also means sometimes there's a higher chance of you getting the big payout in the early game.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed watching all of the junglers this tournament because the emphasis is more on intuition and you making a call but on your judgment of percentages for plays to work out rather than having complete vision and planning ahead, 10 steps, which in the past has really rewarded, people have been referring to all the Korean teams' success in the past and stuff. However, this style of jungling, it really re-emphasizes not falling into a pattern. If I know that my opponent is always going to go for the all-in punish, soon as one laner blows their flash, and everyone on the team is like, well, he's gonna come gank me immediately because I don't have the flash. This guy is super aggressive. He's always gonna come here. Then you got to start to get into the next levels of being able to plan around your opponent better. Even in the worlds where we've been talking a lot about vision being so different.
And the perfect example of that was actually game 1 of C9 versus Afrika, because Spirit was playing Predator Gragas. And for pretty much the entire World Championship, Predator Gragas will clear 3 camps, get his boots, and Predator gank. But Spirit ganked top, mid, and bot lane on first clear before Predator boots. And he got a kill top. I think he got a summoner spell mid, and he also... Anyway, all 3 ganks were pretty effective because they were so surprising. So there's little things like that that you need to do. I want to speed down the map a little bit because we have Jensen Caps. We've already talked about it a little bit with the jungle mid duo. I think the champion pool is an incredibly interesting topic here. Jensen has the Zillion. He also absorbed 7 mid bans before he pulled out the Ahri. But then there is the question of the Aurelia and the Akali.
Yep.
In a series that we think will be top lane counter pick focused or mid lane power pick focused in a lot of ways. Do we think this is going to hurt C9 or be an advantage for Fnatic if this Aurelia and Akali end up coming into play?
I mean, it should. So if C9 wants to keep banning both, that's obviously an advantage for Fnatic because they will have almost 2 guaranteed bans. If C9 are willing to give one of them over, that's also great for Fnatic just based on how strong these picks are. The Aurelia pick obviously is the one where Caps has either been 0-5 or 5-0.
Yeah, he's played it 5
it.
times, no other champion more than once, and he's won 4 out of 5.
Right. So, I mean, he's in the end picked up quite some wins on it, but still, it's been people have targeted that pick in the early game and actually been able to shut it down in some of the games. That could be a strategy if you are C9, but I feel like if they don't want to play Aurelia or Akali, if they don't want to like trade them, they're probably going to ban both, and that will be a Fnatic advantage because Caps has enough picks left. There's just a lot of them that are even higher risk, like a Yasuo pick right now, which needs time before he becomes a big carry. In a meta where it feels like mid laners on one item need to be able to blow up people already, like a LeBlanc with Lute and Zeko. So that one is a bit more high risk, and it could be a good strategy for C9 to try and target the Akali Aurelia again.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting because, like, I think C9 will not want to let those picks through unless they are getting to trade for like a Zillion or a LeBlanc or something like that. And if draft becomes very heavily about targeting top lane and so many bans towards top lane, then we could end up having these guys on some of their signature picks. Like, I feel that Jensen would be, happy playing the Zillion or the LeBlanc into an Akali, for example. Like, those are matchups that I know he's fairly comfortable with. But if those are getting banned out, then I may see, response bans coming through because I think he's not going to want to play into something like an Akali without the picks that he feels comfortable into it, right? Unless maybe, it's a Galio then and something along those lines. But, Jensen is one of the guys who has been pretty comfortable to play both like the very defensive style of mid laners as well as the aggressive ones. And I do think both these players are extremely flexible. So I think a lot of it really will just come down to where the teams want to kind of focus and pick and ban.
Yeah, I'm especially interested in the Akali pick because Jensen hasn't played any Akali and Licorice just had the one game versus Gambit, which they did end up losing. I think he looked like he has a good handle on the champion though. Because kind of what you're talking about, if you go into a best of 5 series with a handicap of 2 bans that you're not willing to trade or play on your side or, make these adjustments for, one of the biggest strengths that teams have shown in, this meta is the ability to adapt and switch out these bans as it needs throughout the series with what your opponent is showing success on. So, whichever team comes in with if they do come in with a handicap like that, I think that would be a huge, huge benefit to their opponent.
And I actually don't expect Cloud9 to have many permaban champions based on how much lead up time they have to this series and how much they've been willing to throw out.
Zilean in
the
phase
past.
2, if it's not picked in phase 1, will probably get banned in most games.
By Fnatic.
By Fnatic.
Most likely, especially if there's like a pinch on mid laners of some kind. But for instance, the only 100% banned champion for Cloud9, they've actually banned Tom Kench in every single one of their group stage and quarterfinal games. But Fnatic also hasn't played Tom Kench and didn't play it that much in the regular season. So there's a chance they can actually drop that ban against Fnatic because it's just not how Fnatic
I mean, they should in game 1.
wants to play. Exactly. And I do think within these 5 days, how much Reaper trusts his soul laners to learn counter picks. Like, we already saw that LeBlanc could beat Aurelie 1v1 in the Fnatic matchup when Scout pulled it out. Like, I do wonder how much bluffing goes on in this draft phase because I would think there's going to be a lot. Like, I think, especially in game 1, Cloud9 would be willing to leave up a lot of stuff and go for counter picks, especially if they have red.
I mean, there's also a great chance we see most of those normal like OP carries getting removed, and we get more of almost a scaling matchup in mid lane. You know, the Swain pick has already been picked by Caps when he had to take it blind. Which is not the kind of pick where you just dominate the laning phase whatsoever. Ryze has been picked quite a few times where you can do well early game, but it's not required for you as a champion to be successful. There's been a lot of those other picks that could come in where it just becomes like almost a team fighting comp versus a team fighting comp. Or you put the emphasis on a winning lane somewhere else, like the top lane or the Lucian, Braum, bot lane. Because I actually think the Braum pick between both supports is it going to end up being huge because they both look really good on this pick specifically, and it's so good in this meta where you're constantly forcing skirmishes. Like, he's one of the best, if not the best, skirmish support in the game. So both teams really excel with this champion.
I'm also really interested to kind of just track Caps' performance because I think that he has been really good in team fighting. I think he's been really good outside of lane, but he has been punished fairly heavily in lane.
Oh, yeah.
You know, especially against Rookie, but in a number of other games as well. And, you know, if Caps has that type of performance where Cloud9 can get ahead through mid lane, if he is getting counterpicked or you know, the Swain game that you point out was one that obviously went fairly bad against IG, then I think that is a way in for Cloud9. But, you know, Caps also has shown that he can absolutely dominate lane. So, you know, if he is the one getting advantage through mid lane, Fnatic becomes, I think, a lot scarier because even with Caps getting down 30 CS or 40 CS or whatever, Fnatic has shown that they know how to keep him in the game, how to get him back in it with really good roams, with lots of jungle attention. And they know that he will always like pay that back in the team fighting stage. So I think that, you know, if Caps is able to create his own advantages, it becomes really difficult for Cloud9 because we know how mid lane kind of spills across the map.
All right. Regardless of how important solo laners have been at this tournament, shall we move on to the bottom lane?
I think we've touched on Reckless and Sneaky in the bot lanes a little bit already. Do you want to start going towards predictions?
Sure. I mean, we can do that. Maybe like it is worth mentioning that Cloud9 have both shown the early game focused lane dominant Lucian as well as
True. Reckless also said in his post-series interview that he would expect this lane to be a little bit easier than the EDG lane that he played against because he thought that iBoy and Mako were super strong. And based on history, you would agree with that, right? But based off specifically the one series that he played,
based on these 3 games, baby,
smashed him. It has definitely not been one of C9's strong suits during the regular season, but I would also say it hasn't been one of Fnatic's strong suits during the regular season. I do think Sivir could be a really big pick if neither one of these teams is looking to dominate lane because it is such a good utility pick, soul in enabler, team fighter, and both of these teams have actually put a pretty high priority on Sivir this tournament.
Definitely agree. I think Sivir for Fnatic is just kind of we don't have to go bot lane when we have this champion. And we also know we have wave clear. And we also know we have a late game carry that Reckless is super comfortable playing. So I think it is definitely one of the best champs. I think Xayah also. The thing I just don't really want to see from Fnatic is the Ezreal pick. I think it just limits them so much when they play because Reckless can't carry on the champion. And that means if you have one of your poor early games, you don't have the late game insurance that you have on the other 80 carry picks. Even his Tristana is then obviously a better choice for him specifically. And his pool is, based on what he's used so far, pretty limited. He's only played 4 different 80 carries. I wonder if the Lucian is going to be banned. If Sneaky plays it game 1 and wins lane really hard and uses that to get an advantage, I could see get removed for game 2, even though it would probably hurt the pride of the Fnatic bot lane to have to ban Illusion.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up was because Lucian can also build semi-defensively, which makes it more difficult for solo laners to kill your marksman, right?
Yeah.
A lot of this tournament has been LeBlanc's, Aurelia's, Akali's, a lot of these solo lane champions that use a lot to dive in on marksmen towards the mid game and try and take them down. So I think that Lucian's scaling actually, which is usually one of the critiques, isn't that bad because he does have so much of this semi-defensive utility. But Sivir is so important because that is the fallback plan. I don't think there's any other marksman champion that is as good of a fallback plan because of the ricochet, the wave clear that you can get with Boomerang Blade. Spell Shield as well denies a lot of people diving into the back, and it just kind of emphasizes what Deficio was talking about.
And I also think because of picks like Sivir, Xayah, probably Tristana, and just the ability of late game team fighting from Reckless, well, I think a lot of the other lanes we've looked at have been fairly even. I personally do put the 80k advantage over to Fnatic. I think only the one I could be scared of would be the Lucian for early game pressure. If Lucian is not going to be either winning lane or if it's just not picked, I think Reckless is just the better AD carry, personally. And I also think Hylissang is the better support, especially because I think this is, like, I can't believe I'm actually saying it at a World Championship, but, like, the high-risk, high-reward support playstyle is now in meta, and that is Hylissang. No matter what the meta is, if it's the slowest meta ever, he's still flashing in your face, trying to kill people left and right. And we sometimes go like, what is happening? This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But this is the meta for this kind of style. And he's suddenly becoming a really scary weapon they can use to also get back in games because he's the guy roaming mid and flashing on people.
Yeah, we should get into the predictions then, as Matt was talking about, because in their interview as well, Cloud9 talked about Zeyzal being the one that always wants to fight.
Okay, so he's also
style.
The supports, man. They're crazy now.
All right, but get us into Official. What do you got?
I got 3-1 Fnatic.
3-1.
Woo. Kobe.
I am going 3-2 Cloud9.
That was your quarterfinal prediction too. It worked out.
I think that there's going to be so much ability to adapt within the draft in this series, which was also similar reasoning I had before, that I do think that both teams are going to be able to find things that work for them in the series, and it'll go several games.
Yeah, I'm 3-2 Cloud9 as well. I think that I totally agree with what you're saying about Reckless like being a stronger team fighter, and I would rather have Reckless in the late game. Certainly, I think Cloud9 is going to look to try to make the game not about that. I think the key for Fnatic is if they can slow down the pace a bit and get to that team fight stage, on even keel, I think that they are going to be the ones taking the series. But this is one I could definitely see going either way, and I just see Cloud9 coming into this with crazy picks, with counter picks, and trying to play extremely aggressive, trying to push the tempo. And that is something that I feel that Reckless has not dealt as well with in the past, which is the only reason I'm really kind of giving a bit of an edge to Cloud9.
I also put some emphasis on Cloud9 improving from each stage that we've seen consistently for this whole year. And so I'm also betting a little bit on that, of how good their practice and preparation has been.
Reaper's got a big brain
at setting them up for these improvements.
I'm betting on his.
We got to give a lot of reason.
Betting on the brain.
Yeah, give a lot of
Reaper's
reasoning
brain.
for this.
I mean, I actually don't.
That's just more stuff to attack after the fact, Kobe. The more stuff you spit out.
We get another 3-2 C9.
I don't think so. I think I'm expecting an incredibly close series.
Yeah.
But I want C9 to win. I even have the cloud hat. Like, I brought it up. The cloud hat.
It's on the ground.
Yeah.
By the way,
It's next to the trash can.
let's remember where this originated.
Yeah.
This was
For those of you on
a
the podcast,
bet.
we're holding up a cloud hat.
this was a bet Azel and Jat had on whether
when was in
Cloud9
last place.
whether
When they were at
Cloud9
10.
would even make playoffs.
Yes.
Azel, you may don your pretty destroyed Cloud9
Yeah.
hat once again.
It's seen some better days. Yeah.
We've got to tape this back up here.
Because Azale lost because he bet that Cloud9 would not make playoffs this year.
Now they're winning worlds, man.
Yeah, now they could go to World Finals.
I mean, they were a mess during the regular season. They have come.
It only made
way.
them stronger.
That's true.
I'm so happy that we have the NA versus EU
Give me the
semifinal. Like when we
prediction,
saw the
Yeah,
bracket
spit it
stage.
out. He's saying
Come on,
Fnatic.
get it
I know
out.
it.
I am going to say Fnatic 3-2.
Yeah, there we go.
When we saw the bracket stage, this was the dream draw that none of us thought would be possible. We're like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe it's just going to be Fnatic. Even that, it might be tougher than a BDDG. Cloud9 versus Africa. Like, is NA really going to knock out Korea? I do want to take a moment to appreciate that this is happening, that we have an NA versus EU semifinal when previously it was like a group stage tiebreaker bout that we usually saw. But I am going to favor Fnatic because of a more consistent regular season performance. They have the highest win rate of all teams still remaining at the World Championship. Their ability to team fight from behind in the EDG series, as well as having an off day, I think give them a slight edge
Liking it.
over
I'm liking
C9.
it.
I want C9 to win, Kobe.
I know. No, I want
I'm
you to
going
keep
3-2
going with
Fnatic.
this because so many pre-tournament expectations have been overturned. So I'm saying,
So really,
okay.
the
Keep it
more
going because-
reasons there are for Fnatic to
because-
win, the more likely it is that they lose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you are just looking, if you're looking at the history and the body of work coming into this, Fnatic are favorites.
For sure.
They're not as strong of favorites now as you would have said even a week ago.
Yeah.
So
Even a
were
week-
RNG.
but even
So
a
were
week,
KT.
yeah, exactly.
So were,
even a
you
week
know.
ago, I would have said Fnatic are even stronger favorites coming into this matchup.
I agree with that, but are you a favorite when the other team 3-0'd a Korean team in a best of 5? Like,
So, okay, this is a good topic to bring up because I don't think the label, the lazy label, a Korean team
sure.
holds much weight anymore.
I mean, I still
For right
think
now.
like so Africa EDG in terms of overall level, I think it's hard to say that there was going to be a huge gap between them.
Yeah.
And while there were some close games in the C9 series, like the first game was obviously a stomp, right? The second game was the one where the Soul laners fell behind, but they managed to get back through the Lucian Braum lane. I looked at that series and it made me actually scared of C9.
Then why is it a 3-1?
What?
Because I still think Fnatic will actually look better in the series itself.
Yeah.
And I also think Fnatic really had an off day against EDG, but that will not be the case here.
You're emphasizing my point of a week ago, Fnatic would have been more heavy favorites.
Yeah,
Because of what we
agree,
just saw,
agree.
we're chipping away.
Yeah.
Chipping away. It's getting closer and closer. I think that's why this is going to be, the most exciting.
It's been a historic Worlds, and honestly, I can honestly say, no matter who wins, I'm happy with the performance from both these
What if
teams.
it's a 3-0
Still.
super stomp?
Still, I don't think it matters. I mean, I think that both these teams have performed, really, really well at this Worlds. Cloud9 is the first North American team to ever make it to this stage. That's incredibly impressive. And if I told anyone that Fnatic made top 4 at this Worlds coming into it, they would say, damn, that's a good job. Like, that's playing to expectation at the very least. I
Sure.
think that is, it's been a very successful tournament for both these teams. And I think, people are certainly going to, if it is that 3-0, they're going to be blasting the other
yeah.
team. But like, I can honestly say they should both be proud of their performance at this event. And I am just so excited to watch the series.
But I will also say now at this point, while I agree with you coming into the tournament, I think most of them would have sold it for a top 4
yeah, now
finish.
they want to win.
At
Greedy
this
man.
point,
Yeah.
One more.
I think you are even more disappointed now
Yes.
if your team does not make the
Because there's
final.
not a KT or an RNG waiting
There's
on the
not
other
a
side.
KT RNG. It's a meta where it's shown that that both EU and NA have had teams that could really play this kind of meta. They really seem to thrive in the high risk, high reward, aggressive play style. Like as an EU fan, if Fnatic do not win the entire thing, I'm almost going to be disappointed now.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, no, you were good enough coming into the tournament to fight for top 4. The other teams were not considered good enough for that, like G2 and C9. And now you're here.
Once you get a taste of winning, you just can't. Give me more.
At this point, man, Fnatic are going to be so mad if they do not get into this final.
Yeah.
But they'll be comforted
All right.
by the C9 World
That's
skins.
not even the first series of the weekend.
We got to move on.
We did. We spent like
45
50 minutes
minutes.
on Fnatic
Our
C9.
producer's going to yell at me if I have to go to the bathroom again. And,
Yeah.
and I already.
You're not going again. You're not leaving another episode
I'm
halfway
right.
through.
Didn't Dracos leave last time?
I had a lot of
and that
coffee and a
enabled
lot of
Kobe.
tea.
He was like, well, if Dracos did it, then we can just do it now.
I appreciate Draco so much. He
I
paved
agree.
the way.
Azale was
For
actually the
bathroom
first one to do it, but we didn't have
Actually,
it in the
that's true.
episode.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
It was all me.
We
I
were
just
so
get no
scared
credit.
at that time that we had to hide it.
Well, I think it's because, yeah.
They cut the video.
Hey, what about
Let's move on.
Yeah,
Set us up for the
today.
next
one.
G2IG.
Yeah, yeah.
G2IG, when we have the conversation about favorites, It was actually RNG and KT. Let me take you back 5 days ago.
Oh my God!
When
Take
we're
me
like-
through
Trip
history.
down memory lane.
Like, man, the strong side of the bracket, all these teams on the left are really happy they're not on the right, where they have to play KT and RNG. Really, they should have been worried about IG and G2 because those are actually the teams that made it to the semifinals, apparently. IG, nearly 3-0s. RNG, there is a last-second Nexus race.
Yep.
They don't get it. It looks like the series is going to turn around. Rookie doesn't buy items in Game 5.
Oh my
But
God!
then they
Yeah.
still win. G2 then down 2-1 in the series. Perks has an Aatrox game where he takes over. He has another
Akali game,
The LeBlanc game.
LeBlanc game at the
insane.
end.
Perks has
Yeah.
had so many
2 massive pop-ups.
incredibly hard carry.
That day, as much as we talk about C9 and Fnatic being the dream scenario, that day, 10 games of League of Legends, 2 of the biggest upsets, both tournament favorites going out, was the most epic day, most surprising day in World's history. The year we have 2 quarterfinals on the same day instead of spread out, we get 2 best
Yeah.
of 5 insane upset series in a row.
Exactly. They knock out both tournament favorites within hours of each
Yeah.
other. We were in the caster room talking, and we're like, "Wow, this is the biggest upset since today."
Since
Like,
3 hours
earlier
ago.
Earlier today, we had the biggest upset. Like, in addition, the
Yep.
way that it occurred with, I think, literally the closest professional League of Legends game that I have ever seen.
Yeah.
With 2 auto attacks, maybe
On the Nexus,
spacing
right.
between the healths of both Nexus. That base race, that's the most competitive. Like, that's the closest League of Legends professional game I've ever seen.
And those games are always so crazy because then you start looking at all the little things that could have been done differently, right? Like there's like a million different decision trees that could change a game, even just
14 million possibilities,
Exactly.
and that was.
I mean, pretty much, right? Like, there's so many things you start looking at, even just when it's from that scenario where KT starts pushing, and it's really crazy because both those series were insane upsets, went 5 games, and I think both these series were extremely close to being 3-0s.
I disagree with that one on the G2 RNG one.
I mean,
I agree on the IG one.
the second game, I thought that
G2 are ahead. They have 2 Soul Laners that are fed. I don't
Yeah.
think RNG, even with that team fight,
even if they take the Baron there, I thought that was probably the
they hadn't like the fight itself wasn't like completely over by any means
No.
when he jumps over. I don't think they necessarily get the Baron there. Like because from watching that game on the analysis, I was like, no, G2 are in a great spot. They have the lead and the correct members right here. They just gotta make sure they don't like all get completely aced in a team fight. And obviously Uzi made a mistake that made it even worse. But to me, that felt like G2 were in a great spot all game long.
I agree that they were in a really good spot, but I felt that the pick on Wonder and then they have 5v4 versus like at the Baron, if they execute that properly, I thought that gets them back into the game and potentially swings the game in their favor.
Potentially.
Game 1, obviously, RNG was very, very dominant.
Yeah.
Game 3 was fairly dominant as well. And I mean, it doesn't really matter if it would have been 3-0 or not because it wasn't.
Yeah.
They made those mistakes, and then you're kind of going down the rabbit hole. But either way, the point is just that these are 2 series that could have looked very differently off of small decisions, and we ended up getting the 10-game day, and I think it was incredible, and the better teams won on those days. But it is really, really exciting to have these 2 teams coming into the semifinals after having overcome these series. Like we talked about it when the brackets got picked, everyone's like, well, this is the best ever for the West. Sorry that G2 had to die to actually get it, right? And they're like, no. They've overcome everything along the way. No one has been betting on G2, it feels like, for so long. Going back even to the Gauntlet, no one thought they would even make it to Worlds.
Yep.
People thought they looked shaky in the play-ins. No one thought there's any way they're going to make it out of their group. No one thought they'd make it out of the quarterfinals. This is the team that just keeps on kind of giving. And I think Perks turned in one of the most impressive series performances that I've ever seen. Like, I think that was probably the most dominant Aatrox professional game I've ever seen. And certainly up there, I mean, there have been some incredible LeBlanc games, but certainly one of the most dominant LeBlanc games I had ever seen as well.
I said on the analyst test the next day when I looked back at the numbers, games 4 and 5, he had a combined kill, death, assist of 18, 1, and 8.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Oh, he
And-
died once. What a noob.
Yeah, in clinching games of a series, no one has ever been that good. There's been like one time in 2014 where it was close, but if you actually just isolate to that Aatrox in the Blanc game, literally the best.
1v9.
Like, it was insane. Anyway,
Yeah,
go.
you guys have done a very good job of setting up the stage for this matchup because to me, G2 have been the ones to really exemplify what people have been talking about with embracing their strengths. Right. Their strengths have been so different from all of the other teams as well that makes it stand out even more. People remember back, if we're trying to go 2 weeks back now, ancient history, and every person and their parents are flaming the living out of Yarnan and Wadid bottom lane. Useless guys, they've got these ridiculous picks held over from the mage bottom lanes. Like, what is Heimerdinger even? Like, you can't even use that garbage here versus the best teams. That's not going to work. And relying only on your solo laners, that's ridiculous. RNG have won all the previous tournaments leading up to this through bottom lane centric team fight play, waiting late game. But G2 have absolutely paved the road through this tournament and even through RNG, which had been the most dominant team this entire year, through solo lanes, through split pushing, and through Hjarnan playing what his personal best champions are in the bottom lane to be able to hold his own against the widely agreed upon best marksman the world has seen.
And it's actually funny that having Uzi on your team almost ended up hurting RNG a bit in terms of their overall strategy in this tournament, where they were like, we must play through bot lane, tank mid laners or utility
Tank
mid
top.
laners, tank top laners. And now most of the other teams in the top four have agreed that you need carry solo laners. That's the way to go. There's a lot of overpowered picks like Akali, Irelia, Aatrox, these kind of champions. And G2 are like, that's great. That's exactly what we want to play, and you guys do not. So Perks and Wonder end up getting great matchups in the games where they were winning. And whenever they just played to those lanes, and Wonder and Wadid tried Yana and Wadid tried their best to just hold on bot lane until game 5 when they actually heavy ganked the bot lane and got a lot of kills. It ended up working out so well when the solo laners got early kills. And that was kind of the key thing. They needed early kills, and they got that in game 2, and they got that in game 4.
It was really funny. Doublelift was actually tweeting that he felt Uzi baited a lot of teams.
Yeah, to be like, I'll play bot
and that
side.
it was like, because they were so good at it all year that he made people think that it was everything is about the bottom lane and not the solo lanes, which a lot of people are feeling it's about now.
Yeah, and I want to just putting to bed RNG and KT, the two tournament favorites, since they're completely gone now. What happened to Xiaohu? Because this dude was so good 2 years ago, and maybe it was just the year and a half of slowly deferring more and more to your bottom lane.
Probably.
Because he got smashed really hard by Perks. And Perks is great, but Xiaohu, a year ago, he was top 5 at Worlds we had on our list. This year he did make the
Let's not trust our
top
list
20 list.
here.
Let's that was just the perception of power back then as a point, but he couldn't play any of the skill matchups, it felt like.
Nope.
He lost all of them. Even before when RNG is winning, I feel like he looked generally weak. It did really feel like maybe the team was just so robotically playing around the bottom side, they kind of lost all ability to adapt to the actual tournament meta. I think it's going to be really interesting looking back on this going into next year. What happens with this RNG team who is supposed to steamroll their way to the finals through Uzi?
And I want to have a small interjection here before you continue it I also, even at this point, don't want people to oversimplify that this game is now suddenly all only around solo lanes and swing the entire other way. Because RNG and playing bottom side in general, I still think has a legitimate argument, to try and speak the devil's advocate from the other side now, and not just look at these instances, still has a lot of pros. And I think you're bringing up specific points around individual players and poor performances that style still can be played to a better degree and find success.
Even with that, they won 5 games, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, they had 2 games
you
to
run this
thumb,
tournament
right?
over and over again.
And
How many times did
they
win?
beat IG in multiple best of 5 series. And IG, we haven't even gotten to them yet. I think their solo laners are the absolute insane, most insane players. Rookie and the Shy, I think, are extremely good. at pushing that style as well. So I just don't want it to be entirely the other way.
Yeah. And I don't want to say that, Shahu's incapable of winning any of those. He played mostly like Aftershock Lysandre. He played 2 games of that. He played Galio and he played Sion, right? Like they obviously drafted for that style. And I also have to give credit, to the monster performance from Perks that I think made him look pretty average and made him look pretty bad. And also, I just felt so much of this really did hinge on flex picks, because if they're not able to do the flex pick, like let me slammed Wonder in game 3. After game 3, I'm like, okay, well, this series is actually done. G2 didn't draft for 1-3-1 that game. That's where they drafted Tristana. They drafted for team fight. I'm like, oh God, they're moving away from the 1-3-1. That's been all their success. Their top lane gets slammed by this Poppy counter pick into the Aatrox. They look like, you just think, okay, it's over. I remember I was casting the series with Quickshot and Vedius, and after that, they both turned to me and they're like, well, I guess it's done, right? Like, I guess it's a 3-1. At least they had that one good game. At least they put up a performance. And then, coming into the next game, they flex away the Aatrox from the Poppy. They slam Poppy with the Rise.
Yep.
And then in the 5th game, they get Aatrox top because they're not willing to pick Poppy, knowing that it could be flexed again. So I think that G2 utilized those flex picks so incredibly well, and I felt that series really did hinge on Game 4, where they outthought them in the draft, and that denied Letme's response in Game 5. And he maybe didn't have another response, right? Maybe if that's the Shy, or maybe if that's someone different, then that Sion becomes a Fiora or another counter pick once, it's in the second round and Poppy's been banned away. But on that day, like, I have to give so much credit to the coaching staff and to the players to have that adaptability, because to me, that was the defining moment. Flexing that Aatrox, deciding Game 4, and then Game 5, you see it shown in the draft that RNG was like, well, what do we pick here, right? And they default to a Sion that Wonder then gets very ahead of, and we have this incredible game from Perks. So flex picks and the performance of the soul laners has to be credited so much. It certainly wasn't just an underperformance from RNG. This was an astounding performance, I think, from the G2 squad.
I don't think G2's accomplishments should be cheapened in any way.
Yeah, not at all.
I haven't actually heard a lot of people scream underperforming RNG either. I think a lot of people looked at G2 and they went like, wow, a lot of people had concerns regarding how many picks do you have per lane. Well, it went from, they can only play Heimerdinger to, they can only play Heimerdinger and Jhin. They can only play Heimerdinger, Jhin, and Sivir, and you can just you keep adding on, and it made it a lot harder
just
for
ban all the power picks in Heimerdinger and Tom Kench.
Exactly.
Just ban Akali and Aatrox and Urgot and Yasuo.
And Ryze top lane was suddenly really good as well when they played it. So there is now enough picks for G2 to be very flexible in all the roles. And I just like in the last game how they changed up everything in terms of, like, we know RNG's one way to win. They pick Thresh. It's like win bot lane with Uzi. Okay, we have Braum Jhin. Perfect gang setup. Yankees goes bot lane like 5 times and just says smack, smack, smack. Ward on the lantern every time. Uzi clearly is just like, what's happening here, And like, it was so successful. And then the soul laners automatically also just got ahead.
Pro tip, by the way, for the word lane, if someone does that to you, you can zoom in all the way and you can almost always click on the lantern.
Well, there's also a bind to not target wards with right click, but we don't think Uzi had, like, our assumption was that Uzi doesn't have that bound, because every time they'd put a ward on the lantern, he would auto the ward.
Yeah.
Instead of actually.
He didn't have it bound for sure.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of one of the most funny little mini games.
Such a great strat, man.
Yeah, because so many things have happened.
Every time they did it, they put more wards. Like the first one was 1 ward, the next time was 2, and then by the time they were killing,
the end of the game was like 5 wards and a pink. Yeah.
It was like within this incredible upset that's like a shocking moment in history, there's this super comical mini event going on where everyone's just dogpiling on the lantern, and it looks like it's a useless ability.
Yeah.
They have all the champions like, trying to block
How
away.
do they always have wards ready? That's the other thing. Like
obviously planned.
It would be like wards and then several champions as well, and you can almost see the panic in Uzi's face. And whoever's trying to click on the lantern, they're like, oh God, it's happening again.
Everyone went into solo queue and tried to do that to Thresh every game now.
Yeah, but
people just remember you can do it.
Yeah. All right. Honestly, though, we should get into the match.
I think that's the very last thing, though, and that might actually be different now for G2, is like, after the game when Perks goes, there was no pressure on us. We had nothing to lose. We played against the MSI champion, the Asian game champion, the Rift Raff champion, blah, blah, blah. I think especially in that game 5, when it was 2-2, I think RNG came in and be like, okay, we're not feeling too great about this. And then when the first, like, it's been a strategy in the past of like early gank Uzi in best of 5s and like trying to get him down.
Yeah.
when that worked, like Uzi ended up playing terrible in that game
Yeah.
until some of the last team fights, and even there he made mistakes. And G2 just like kept punishing him over and over and over. So mind games, superior from the European team.
Yeah. That's why PvP games are so fun. 'Cause-
Yeah.
Get in the head.
Exactly. You're playing the mental game. All right.
Okay, so we just talked about how G2 was able to beat RNG, right? A lot of solo lane power picks. We did say it was a good stylistic matchup. They also were able to play around RNG's strengths. Even though IG is another LPL team that RNG was able to beat, they are completely different than RNG. The most interesting thing to me in this G2 IG series is, and I think was going to decide it, is whose solo laners are better. Because the whole power that G2 has been getting in this draft is their ability to flex pick Aurelia, Akali, Aatrox, Ryze, those carry matchups. IG's going to opt into those as well.
Yeah.
Like there's so much that is going to come down to the ability to win the skill matchup, get solo kills, avoid ISO deaths, and eventually then try and take over. I don't think either of these teams play through their bottom side. I think they play through their solo lanes, and it's going to be the Shine Rookie versus Wonder and Perks. I think that's the whole series.
It's really funny because the first thing once you started talking that I started thinking of were, yeah, they're not going to play through their bottom lanes, but mistakes from their bottom lanes have still been very important. Like Jackie Love backwards ultimates and
I'm just ganking him in the
also
early game. Just gank
not
him.
bad plays but good plays as well. Flashing forward,
Yeah.
to critting, winning team fights. Like
Yep.
even the players that you're not playing around. Of course, it goes to reasoning, right? Once you get to this level,
Marks would just matter in late game.
you're top 4, top 8 in the world. Every
Yeah.
single player on your team has an incredible, impact on the game. You can't hide a bad player anymore. These are like discussions that we had way back in even season 1, where we're like, oh, we're getting to the point where we can't, carry.
Jad
I'm
anymore.
blanking on. No, I'm trying to remember the
Kobe.
name of the player on your team.
Azale.
Anyways, we had some.
You definitely
ideas
couldn't
about-
carry me.
But like
Deficio.
you can't
Not that.
carry. You can't hide players that are going to make mistakes.
Yes,
like that.
yes, we
All right,
agree with you.
We've gone all through four of us. Okay.
so,
Anyways, support given.
Yeah.
The bot lane point. Agree.
Yeah.
Obviously, on paper, it's not going to be the big one everyone is excited about. However, I think it's actually the lane both teams can find kills towards. I think we've seen that during the tournament as well. Not necessarily because like Wonder, keep saying Wonder, Yanin and Wadid will not necessarily play over aggressive. They will actually try and play a bit passive, but that does mean they can be found under the turret. And if you do coordinate like a roam from mid plus a jungle gank, teams have found success trying to kill them. And on the other side, Jackie Love will literally just perma push 24/7. No summoners, no vision. I do not care. Push, 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 push. I actually think the best way for G2 to play the early game is not necessarily to try and go and gank Rookie over and over because that's something he's shown he can handle. Go bot lane and get free kills. It's literally
The
right
Shy
there.
and Rookie are going to be putting a lot of pressure on
that's
those
the
solo
I think
lanes.
Wonder Perks have to be able to hold 1v1.
I mean, they do.
And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, Jackie Love definitely plays crazy and kind of pushes with reckless abandon. But I think the thing about IG, because I've watched them all year, and I feel like all of them do that, and they just all
Sure.
and they're basically saying that it's like your jungler can't be everywhere. You can only punish one of us, and the other two they kind of count on to get advantages. And one of the reasons that I think this is actually a very bad matchup for G2 is simply because, like, yes, Perks had that monstrous series, and if he plays to that level, maybe it's different, but I favor both Rookie over Perks and the Shy over Wonder. And I think that makes it really, really tough when there is a team that I think, just has the strongest solo laners, and that is the style that G2 has been winning with. When you look at Rookie, like, I feel he's been the clear best mid laner in the entire tournament. Like, how he performed against not against Perks, against Caps. He looked very dominant, but even just Caps, because Caps is someone who has been so good in Europe and so good, even against Perks, has had really good performances. And obviously the transitive properties don't really always pan out, but Rookie has been such a monster there, and it feels harder for G2 to get the same sort of advantage with flex picks in the way that they did against RNG, because someone like the Shy has so many more answers, right? Like, you can ban out the Poppy phase 2, but he's going to be able to be willing to play a Fiora or a Jace or a Gangplank or a Darius or whatever. And I think that is what makes this really, really tough. And I think it'll be really interesting to see which side is going to be prioritized, because IG to me was the team that really like showed me how red side can have a big advantage, even when blue side was winning very heavily in NA and EU. IG was doing the red side and counterpicking for a rookie, counterpicking for Shy, and being able to win through smashing lanes with counterpick.
Obviously, we have to wait for the series to play out.
I want to talk about what he was just talking about.
I know, I got stats.
Okay.
And then you can go. IG has played 9 red side games, 3 blue side games.
Yeah.
They're 6-3 on red side. G2 has played 5 blue side games, 7 red side games. However, in their best of 5 against RNG, we're picking blue side, and IG was
picks.
picking red side. And I think because Invictus likes counter picking, but G2 liked power picking to flex, there is a good chance we see G2 blue side every single game this series because that's the preferred side for both teams. But
Okay,
go for it.
back to your solo laner rankings. I have been still talking to players in Korea right now, and I do think that just given, if I was going to make like a top 20 right now,
There's 20
just,
players
just
left.
with players that are still here,
Yeah, that's all the teams.
I would put Invictus Gaming's solo laners higher rated than the G2 solo laners, but I think it's by much slimmer margins that aren't going to manifest that heavily. And I think the aspect of how you play on the day is going to mean more than maybe a couple percentage points one way or the other.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to say that.
Yeah, I know, I
way
know.
better.
I know. I'm just adding on to what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to contradict you. I can definitely and you can definitely as well see games where Perks has as hard of a carry.
Oh, for sure. Or harder. I mean, his quarterfinals were insane.
It'd be hard to have like a harder carry. It'd be difficult to carry harder than some of those performances. And a lot of the players in Korea still that are still screaming these guys have a lot of good things to say about Rookie and the Shy.
Yeah.
But even giving those things, I have a lot more confidence, similar to how Cloud9 have improved in all the stages that we've seen them at. Perks and Wonder, I think, have really earned their keep.
Yeah, I think Wonder will actually be fine. I don't think he's gonna beat the Shy or Duke, but I think he will definitely hold his own.
Totally.
Wonder's biggest problem this tournament has just been outside of laning phase. He greets a lot in terms of where he wants to go, but that is part of the success also, because it will also work from time to time. It is just the high risk, high reward. But I think 1v1 he will be fine. I think laning wise, Rookie is just the best player in the world.
Yeah.
Like every game he plays, he's like 20 to 30 CS up. He TPs bot lane, doesn't get anything, walks back mid. For some reason, when a wave of
Doesn't
6
buy
minions,
items
when a
still.
wave of 6 minions, he
Still
gets
up.
20 minions. I don't get it.
I was also that's another point. Like one of the games, we see him walking up, walking down, walking up, walking down, like roaming as much as Faker did at Worlds on Galio with a global ultimate.
And still 20 CS up.
Exactly. Everyone was like, oh my God, Faker's insane. He's trying to win 3 lanes at once and almost pulling it off. And Rookie's doing it on something like Syndra, walking his ass up to top lane, walking his ass down to bottom lane.
It's crazy.
It's actually insane how good.
Because so the mid lane difference in the KT-IG series was obviously huge. Yukal in the first couple of games really struggled big time, made a lot of individual mistakes, lost lane pretty hard. He found comfort in the Urgot mid lane, where you could get pushed in, but you would try and be somewhat even in farm, at least only be a little bit behind, and then you could be relevant in team fights. That was kind of his way of
He
playing
was
that
also
game.
rushing Cowl, like the
I mean,
most
he was
defensive
it
possible.
was just like, I need to just survive against Rookie.
Yeah.
I don't know if G2 has that luxury of saying, Perks, we just need you to
I don't
survive.
think they do.
He's
They
got
most
outplayed.
likely have to be like, Perks, you're going to have to fight fire with fire, and it might mean that Yankees has to be there. It might it might mean that Wadid has to be there. It's very early in the morning for us right now. So
I mean, we're all
brain's
running
not
on like
there.
2% brain
Exactly.
power for a while. So.
But if Perks can beat Rookie in the series, even if it's with help, that's how you have a huge
Totally
win
agree.
condition
Yeah.
for G2. It's just not very likely.
Yeah, and the final matchup I want to talk about before we get to predictions is Ning and Yankos. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about these guys. Yankos has been known for inconsistency. Some games he looks like the best jungler in the world. Other games he does 25 damage per minute on Camille. And then we have Ning, who during the series we were like, does this guy only play Camille, Xin, and Zach? Because that's really what it feels like. And the Xin Zhao priority was just climbing throughout the IGKT series over and over and over. And then game 5, Xin Zhao's up. What does he do? Infinity Edge Kindred. And then he carries late game. It was the most ridiculously wild yet effective thing because the game ended up going late and he hit like 100% crit Kindred and was helping carry late game team fights. But that matchup to me is fascinating. We've said it a lot. Ning leads the LPL junglers in kills and in deaths. Very rare combination you got right there. Highest action score you've ever seen.
Especially for a team that almost never loses, to have the player with the most deaths. Like they're 18-1 or whatever, both splits.
Deaths.
Yeah.
In the LPL regular season. Anyway, what do you think of the matchup?
It's a couple of, we use the term coin flippy for junglers sometimes, that junglers that come in predisposed to take a lot of risky early game plays. Because you get big rewards out of it. You also can look very bad. This is a good time to reemphasize the public service announcement that we had kind of with Cloud9 Fnatic, but also, and even more importantly, maybe here, one of these teams can be made to look very, very bad in one of these games because of the ability of on both sides to snowball very heavily. And I think these junglers both kind of exemplify that because G2 have lived and died by Jankos early game a lot. Sometimes he had a successful gank, getting both the soul laners, off to the moon, and then, they hard carry 1-3-1. He has also had some early games where you die a couple times early game, then they have no control at all. Neither of them can get anything going, and they just crumble and lose off of that. So I think that this could be very one-sided and swingy.
I mean, the jungle matchup might end up being the most important.
Yeah.
Because if we assume that the soul laners are not necessarily just killing each other left and right, the first jungler who succeeds with the gank or kills the enemy jungler and gets the map advantage that way, you start snowballing the early game. And if it's
carry versus carry, one gets ahead, the other is worthless a lot of times.
We might see IG, however, try in at least one of the games to run the Kai'Sa, like Galio composition they ran a few times, where it's like Jackie becomes the late game carry, and it's not about Rookie specifically. That is probably not an option for G2. They will stick to what they're doing now with like the Jhin and these kind of picks, unless they run Sivir. That's the one where they could say we have our late game AD carry to play around, but it's not been their preferred style, obviously.
I'd also say that Rakan becomes such a big pick just based off of the performance that Baolan had on this pick.
Yes.
Like in the quarterfinals, he was incredible on both of his Rakan games. Wadid certainly can take it away. He has three games on it in the World Championships. But I think, you do not want to give this over because especially if they're going to try to play the style you're talking about, where they had the Kai'Sa, where you have the Rakan and the Galio, he was finding the perfect engage what felt like every single time. And
get rid of it.
Getting Rookie in the middle. So that does become a pick that you feel they have to ban out. And I'm interested to get your thoughts. If you think that they have to ban out the Rakan, then like where do you focus those other couple bans? In a world where it is, Rookie and Shy and then people talk a lot about Ning and his small champion pool. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Urgot has not been a huge priority for G2, mainly because they've gone for more lane bully snowballers. They could actually get ahead who could be huge split pushers. I think Urgot has become more of a team fighter, even though he, of course, can sit in a side lane. It's just not his preferred thing. So I'm thinking picks like Rakan, I don't want to see on Baolan. I don't think necessarily that Urgot is something G2 wants to give away, but I don't think it's a first pick for them either. And then I'm just thinking about Ning specifically.
I think you banned Xin Zhao.
Because Ning has not played Nocturne, and is actually the second most banned pick by IG themselves. And Nocturne is huge for G2. Like when they get Nocturne, Tahm Kench, it is the dream 1-3-1 setup. Because you cannot touch sidelines. No matter if Fiora, anything, it doesn't matter. The moment you step forward past the river, smack, you get double ulted and you die. So I think if you can get rid of Xin Zhao and you get a Nocturne pick, it's a huge advantage for G2, but Nocturne might just be perm banned by IG.
Even just for soul laners.
I think Tahm Kench, for me, the number one perm ban, no matter who you are playing G2, is Tahm Kench.
Sure, Tahm Kench is huge for them as well.
Their split push is obviously their strongest strategy. Tahm Kench is such a unique support that nothing else can replace this champion. And whenever there's something like that, that's a single champion. it feels like a no-brainer. Like you have to do that.
And I mean, it even stopped RNG, the best bot lane team in the world, from being able to really heavily punish that bot lane. When they're sending people down there, they still couldn't kill off Yarn and Wadid when he did have that Tahm Kench. So I definitely agree. That's a huge win against G2.
All right. What do you guys think is going to happen in the series?
You go first this time, Jet.
All right. This
Question
is the one.
asker?
Yeah.
The one that
Got him.
is most likely to blow up in my face because I'm going to make a bold prediction.
Ooh.
I think IG has a chance of 3-0ing. So I'm going to say IG 3-0 because if the soul lanes do tip in their favor, and since G2 needs the ability to leverage their power picks into lane advantages so much, I think just with Rookie and the Shy on the other side, it could be just a really bad matchup for G2. So I'm going to say IG 3-0. Keeping in mind, this is the world of upsets. And like I said, this is the highest chance I have.
Nobody has to make concessions for their predictions anymore.
You can predict anything.
Try to get it.
I mean,
I think G2 have found enough picks now per role to actually have a lot of different strategies going into this. Not necessarily changing playstyle too much, but obviously to execute the 1-3-1.
build me up, Deficio.
I also think IG will keep
undecided.
picking Kai'Sa over and over, and that will not necessarily benefit them in every game. So I'm looking at a 5-game series. My brain and my prep has not fully decided which way it goes, but on the podcast, I will say G2 takes it 3-2.
Nice.
And I will say that Jankos becomes the MVP of the series by actually just being way better than Ning.
All right.
Ooh.
He just hyped you up, Kobe.
I mean, yeah, I'm undecided.
I cannot
Still
guarantee this is my
listening to it.
prediction on the show in 2 days' time,
It's
but
cheating.
it's
You're
3-2
locked
for
in.
now.
This could be such a swingy best of 5.
Are you on the desk for the show? Do you have to make a prediction?
I'm on
air?
the desk.
Oh, okay,
And the
so
thing-
we get to find out.
There's a lot of things talking for IG here, but I think there's actually G2 have answers.
I have heard from so many people in Korea right now that IG is the best team in the tournament.
I know it is really painful.
That it's kind of biasing me and swinging me that way. But much, like the arguments I was building for Cloud9, I'm like really searching and trying to build these for G2 because they had such an incredible tournament, proving, their individual style and beating RNG and
The thing is, for me,
building me up. But
I think the more I look
It
at
is.
it, the more I will go IG side.
Yeah, it
but
is.
for now, I'm on I'm probably doing a 3-2 IG on the actual analyst desk, but I'm here for G2, baby. Let's do it.
you just weakened it so much though, because even if afterwards
I can't fully.
He's
jump
like, I'm
on
here
the-
for
you know
G2,
what's gonna
baby,
happen now?
for 2 days, and then I will predict
they'll win
IG.
I'm saying there's a good
Someone
chance.
will clip his argument for 3-2 and he'll be like, look, Deficio called it.
What a prophet. Do that, please, if I get it right.
the argument strong enough though. Is there a clip where you could cut out all of your backtracking?
Where did
Come on,
Jankos
Kobe, what's the prediction?
gets the
You're
road
waffling.
picks, man?
All right, I'm gonna do it strong then.
Really?
Yes, strong, because
All right, what is it?
I don't think there's as much adjustment in this series. I think that both these teams pretty clear on their styles, and I don't think, like you said, there's a lot of difference for G2. G2 know who they are,
Yep.
and they're gonna play their style. And if they win, they win. If they do not win, then
They
they're gonna
lose.
continue to play that style, and they'll lose.
So,
I think that.
Get to the point.
All right, I'm predicting 3-1 G2. They are
Wow.
going to win the split pushes so hard. I don't know.
This is the weakest strong prediction I've ever heard. It took him 5 minutes.
you're suspended.
Boo. 3-1 IG.
Boo,
I think that
sorry, go ahead.
From talking to a lot of the players as well, almost unanimously, every player is telling me that Rookie is the best mid laner in the world.
yes,
The
he is.
Shy
They
is
all
the
agree
best.
on that.
The
We
Shy is the
agree.
best top laner in the world, and IG is the best team in the world.
But this
They're gonna
is
play Duke.
This is 2018, my friend.
It
You're
is.
predicting upset.
It is 2018. But it's not because I think G2 is a bad team. I actually think G2 would have a better chance in the form that they are playing against both Fnatic and Cloud9. I think that stylistically, I actually think this is the worst team left from in the tournament, and I think that's maybe a bit unfortunate for them. But I think that IG has more flexibility. They can play more different styles, and I think they have the soul laners to match the style, as well as the soul laners with the champion pools to match the picks that G2 has. And if G2 can't win soul lanes, I don't think they can win the series.
I'll say
5-game
this.
series. It's 5
If
games.
G2 takes down RNG and then IG moving into
Then
finals,
it's insane.
I changed my mind. Bottom lane is going to be how G2 win it. I'm not changing my prediction. I'm changing my reasoning. I've now decided that the bottom lane is going to be the way that they win it, and it is going to be Wadid.
Yeah,
that is MVP.
Yankas Wadid, man. That's the combo.
All right.
3-2 G2.
Very strong
What just
prediction,
happened?
lads.
5 games.
What just happened?
We convinced ourselves.
Listen, anything could happen. This is, I think that's the largest spread we've ever had in predictions, like 3-0 on one side to 3-1 on the other with 2 people on each team. I think it speaks to worlds. Like,
Wait, do you have 3-1 or 3-0?
I have
he did
3-1.
3-1. But even then, I think it's rare we have
which
one person go 3-1 for like G2 and then me go like
Right,
for IG.
right.
I do think it speaks to the variance of worlds.
Yeah.
Like, even when Azale said like G2 could be favorites over Fnatic, like a week ago we're saying, well, G2
I
never
disagree
beat
with that one. Fnatic would 100% win that matchup.
However, like,
I'm not even saying that
whatever
they're
happened
favorites,
2 months
more just,
ago
like, give
also
them
doesn't
better
Yeah, I get it,
necessarily
I get it.
apply now with how much the teams have changed and committed to their
The
current style.
point is, you can construct an argument for any of these teams and not have it be one of these ridiculous, meme arguments. So have we had a world where, some team didn't sneak through or something like that, where we didn't have a situation where you can legitimately construct the argument? Some of them are stronger, some of them are
It's not the
weaker,
Albus
but-
Nox Luna quarterfinal
No.
versus like an
I mean,
AFK where
if,
no
if
chance.
Perks has the performance that he had in the quarterfinals, in the semifinals, well, congratulations, G2, you're in the finals,
Yeah,
right?
no,
Like,
and
if you repeat that is what it takes, and he has shown that he can do it. But all I can predict on is what I have seen, and that's all we can keep predicting on.
I agree.
But it's like the predictions have meant nothing.
But that's
this world.
That's why for me as well. I'm also looking at Ning and Baolan against Fnatic in the game where they lose
Roxanne
in the
Hilsing.
tiebreaker. I'm like, Ning and Baolan made every mistake possible in the game and got hard punished for it, which gave early advantage to Fnatic.
Yeah.
That same thing can happen here, and it just only needs to happen in 3 out of 5 games.
All right.
Kobe, final thoughts?
We've had our fun predicting the semifinals.
Yeah.
I want to move it ahead because
Yeah.
we have some more interesting,
We have to be
broader topics.
We have to be real quick on this one, actually.
Oh, we're almost done?
Unfortunately, yeah. But we said at the start of the episode we would have a theory as to what happened to the Korean teams. So I think we're going to go around. Everyone gets like 90 seconds to sum up why they
Okay.
think Korea basically didn't make semifinals this year, and then we're going to wrap the episode. So who wants to start?
I can try and start.
All right.
I'll try and do it even
Why
shorter than
did
90
Korea fail this year?
I think a lot of the game changes move the game towards proactivity instead of being the most or being the strongest strategy instead of reacting. I think a lot of nerfs to vision, to tanks. I think the nerf to Baron's damage it dealt as well are all things that makes it easier to play aggressive comms, look for early game leads, and then use your vision to just instantly kill whatever the enemy team has placed, and then they can't sit there and just pluck them over Baron 24/7 and kind of like deny you from starting Baron. And because the Baron deals a bit less damage, it's much easier now also to start it without having big tanks and like jump in and out and constantly bait fights. So I think there's more tools for the proactive team to actually punish the defensive ones. And I think the Korean teams still tried too much to run slower drafts and slower play styles, but they were hoping like, oh, normally we can predict the bot lane play that's about to happen. It will take them 10, 15 seconds to kill this guy so we can react in time and punish them. Now it takes 2 seconds because it's LeBlanc Sin Xiao doing this. Smack, someone is gone.
Yeah.
And you can't do the same style against us anymore. So
gotta
I
be
think
shorter
that
than
hurt
90
them.
seconds.
Yeah,
That was
way too
shorter.
long.
That was like 60 seconds.
We're
Someone
gonna
can
time that after the fact.
Someone should time this.
You're
This
gonna
was
be wrong.
70
All right,
seconds.
I'll go next. I think that in previous years, when Korea has come in and not necessarily been able to like keep up with other teams, they've been able to adjust because it's been like a stylistic adjustment. I do wonder though if defensive macro is like quote dead and Korea played that style, so to speak, for so long, and the teams that came here were also the defensive macro teams. I still think that if Griffin qualifies in, and if Kingzone doesn't have the choking down the edge, they wouldn't win Worlds, but I think they would have definitely done better because the strengths of these teams were not the strengths of the teams that were rewarded at this tournament.
I
This
wouldn't
is-
say
this
that
is part of
KT
it.
is defensive macro.
You don't know now if he's gonna
KT
buff
lost
90
to
seconds.
IG, who I think is like, and that was super close. I think KT still had a good chance of winning this tournament with the game in its current state. I think IG just overperformed them, but I do think like Gen.G's defensive macro was completely wrong for this tournament, and they were a weaker team.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people citing the vision and the warding being different. But I actually like another kind of unique thing that has changed in the game, which is the bounty system. And the way that the new bounty system works is that as the game progresses, you are more rewarded for continuing to try and make targeted big plays on specific people. So the risk will go down because if this guy has a bounty and you die in your play, you will lose much less than if you try that play immediately after he has no flash from the first time he outplayed you. You actually kill him this time.
5 kill
you get a
shot down.
giant bounty that is worth more than twice sometimes, more than 3 times sometimes what you lost in your first attempt. And that's something that I haven't seen quite as discussed, which I thought is kind of interesting. I'm not sure how strongly I feel about it.
So I will say,
but I want to bring this topic a little bit more.
The way the bounty system works is you get 50% of the gold back that you've given over, basically. So it's not like
it starts at 2 kills.
It's not like you're just getting more for killing him back, but like more than you.
But it's
used to.
better, better for aggressive
more
plays.
than your single attempt at dying before. So if we're already in a state where he has a big bounty, and I make an attempt and I fail at it, wasn't as big of a deal, unless they're getting a big objective on it. As the success.
You guys hit pretty much all the in-game points that I wanted to touch on, so I'll just touch on a tournament format thing that I actually think also was an advantage to some of the Western teams. Is Korea traditionally has been the best at adapting in between weeks. In the past, there was a week in between first week and second week of groups. There was also more time in between groups and quarterfinals. The quarterfinals were on different days. There was more time for them to adapt, for them to plan, for them to research the meta and see what was coming. And I think the fact that they didn't have that much time was something that hurt them compared to the teams that were more reliant on surprising picks, on counter picks, on explosive strategies, as some of the Western teams were.
Yeah, and also, even though I'm cheating because I get to go twice, I do want to mention that last year, Misfits was a team fight away from beating SKT. C9 was a team fight away from beating Team WE. So I think some of the things we mentioned contribute. It was closer than we gave credit for last year as well. It's just this year we're seeing it spill over the top.
We got a wrap, Kobe. You guys got this or that to do.
No, I know we have a wrap, but there was another topic, and I'll phrase this in a very quick way as well, that we wanted to talk about. That was going to be a world's topic of people saying, is this year a fluke, or are Western teams and Western players that much better? Will there be repeat success for this type of worlds down the road, or will it go back to normal? And I'll phrase it as, if Western League of Legends success is a cryptocurrency that I made right now, Western success, would you buy this? Because right now it's at a pretty high value. You buying?
The risk of the meta changing,
or do you think it's going to drop down?
I think if the meta stays the same as it is right now, I'm buying.
Okay.
If the meta changes,
you
I'm
buying
not buying.
or selling?
Well, crypto is set at the point of 3 out of 4 teams being in the semis Western teams. No, I'm not buying. I don't think that's going to be
Jad is selling.
consistently repeatable. I think they'll be better than before, though.
I'm selling because the meta is going to change going into preseason.
That's the problem.
And I don't know. If we had this tournament and we ran it back next year, I'd have faith in the Western teams doing well. But I have no idea what the meta is going to be, right? The preseason is going to change. Everything's going to be all new again.
But
that's the big issue.
I would say, in counter to that, what you just said, how Korea didn't have long enough to adapt here.
For sure.
Western teams have adapted in 2 days. One day, C9 sees Vitality have success. Immediately afterwards, the next day, they commit all into it for the group stage.
But if the game slows down,
back in the game,
if
and
the game slows
slow.
down more, let's say tanks come back, it's hard, it's easier to defend. Korean teams will once again just become better, and then we will not have this scenario.
But I do think that overall, the level definitely up.
I think NA and EU teams, I'm more willing to say they can make it back to semifinals. I'm not willing to say 3 out of 4.
Oh no, 3 out of 4 is obviously crazy.
That's why I'm
fine. That's crazy.
Anyway, thank you for joining us, Deficio. That was a fun episode previewing both semifinals. It's going to do it for this episode of The Dive. Here are the times. Invictus Gaming versus G2. The game starts at 1 a.m. Pacific time on Saturday, but if you think about it, that's actually really late Friday night, so don't miss it. Then 24 hours later, 1 a.m. on Sunday, is going to be Fnatic versus Cloud9, and Worlds Countdown starts 30 minutes before that on both days. So tune into that too, because I like that show, and I think it does a good job previewing the matches.
Nice bias.
See you then. You're on the show too.